All right, so lately there's been some confusion for some people between billet gears and factory gears. And I see people trying to sell stock gears on transmissions as if they were billet. So I'm going to do a quick overview and comparison on the gears between the available billet gears, which all come through Robinson, who RD Transmission, myself, Mulkey, other people use on these Raptor 700s, and in comparison to stock. So, okay, let's start with second gear. So, second gear primary. The gear in my left hand is a factory gear that has been micro polished. The gear in my right hand is a billet gear. Now these are pretty hard to tell apart initially because the factory gear has been polished. The main defining change is, there we go, how the edge of the gear is cut. And it's very, very defined lathe marks there on the tip of the tooth. It's very defined compared to the billet gear has almost none at all, and that's real consistent in their manufacturing. So stock gear, billet gear, you can see a pretty big difference there on how it's made. Also the billet is a bit more of a gray. This shoulder, this gear without a shoulder, that constitutes a replacement gear, versus the ones that come new on the bikes have a shoulder that looks identical to this. So the billets, all the ones I've seen have the shoulder. Some of the factory gears have it, some don't. But the main thing on this second gear is the mill marks. So let's go to second gear output. Left hand stock, right hand billet. So looking at them from this side, the main difference you'll see is this chamfer edge versus this one is pretty much a plunge cut, versus this one has a lot more taper there. And the depth is a bit different. The billet is shallower. On the other side here, you can see mill marks inside the billet in the pocket. And in the stock gear, you just see casting. So I don't know. I believe these are pressed powder metal. So however that process is, but basically you see the cast instead of actual mill marks. So on the back, they look pretty much the same on the back. Once again, if you look at the tip of the tooth on the billet, it's smooth. And on the factory gear, you see very pronounced and raised cuts there. So that's that gear, how to tell those two apart. We'll go on to, this is fourth gear input. Now the only billet fourth that is available is this close ratio that we came up with years ago when we were working with RD Trans on it and got them made through Robinson. So there's one tooth difference. Besides the visible changes, this close ratio is one tooth off. There's one tooth less on it. So obviously looking at it, you see the casting again. This one, the factory gear on my left, has a recess cut. The billet is not recess. On the other side of it, same thing. You have a relief there, no relief here. How this edge is cut around this gear. Once again, you see milling marks. And how this is cut when they do a pro cut on this, that's notched away. Now, this gear can get pro cut by a company cutting that, but you also see the difference in the width of this cog, visibly wider. Now, going on to fourth gear output. So, factory gear on my left. So, as far as I know, this fourth gear output is not made in a billet. What they do have is when we do an override transmission, we have what they call the clutch. And you can make this shift fork clutch starting with this gear. So in identifying if you have a billet clutch or a stock clutch, obviously this one has been back cut there. The main difference is you see the shoulder here in that casting. You also see the change in depth, whereas this one is just a plunge cut here, and this shoulder is smooth. So from external, from the outside, smooth on the billet, rough on the factory gear. We also have same thing. Factory gear has these rough edges on it. All right, so that is that. We will go on to third gear output. Billet in the right hand, cast in the left, or factory in the left. Once again, huge reliefs here for material savings. This one has been cut for override, but once again, you see mill marks in it. And no relief. Other side, you see the casting. Here you see mill marks or lathe marks. The relief is about, it's about the same depth in relief. Some of these billets along the way didn't get enough relief here, so they do look a little bit different. From the side profile, this third being polished, it doesn't have the standard milling marks or lathe marks on the edge of the tooth. But as you can see, once again, the billet on my right hand is smooth. The other main difference is the width of this cog. If this were not back cut, it would be all the way over to the edge where my thumb is at, almost twice the size as this. So on to the last gear. This is, got them backwards there. This is the third gear input. Both of these are the factory gear and this gear in my right hand are both modified for override, utilizing fifth gear, or cut to just use 2, 3, 4. So once again, you see the rough casting. This one is a little rougher than normal because it's been beat or sandblasted heavier, but pretty visible difference there in how that is, as well as this machining mark around the edge of that tooth. On the tips of the gear, there's a very fine tip there. The billet gear is actually a bit wider of a tooth, on the tip of the tooth. I don't know if you can see that. You can still see the milling marks there on those, on the factory gear. But this tooth design is actually a bit different. I don't know if you can see on camera, but it's a little bit different profile in that tooth. So when you're looking at transmissions to buy, it's fairly easy to look at them and identify what is factory and what is not. So the last part that I don't have here for the override setup is this billet clutch, and I was just going to show you a factory third gear. So that would be the other clutch, that a billet one would look like that, in the same size as this one here. But I don't currently have that piece available to show you in the billet. But same thing, looks identical in design. So sorry to say, somebody is wrong about what they're trying to sell, and I see it a few times here and there. Guys don't know what they have, or somebody along the way got confused and they're selling the wrong stuff. So just buyer beware.